Welcome to Literary Journeys with River. Today we dive into Born of Blood and Ash, the moment where everything changes and destiny becomes unavoidable. Remember, this is just a summary, not the full book. If you enjoy this type of content, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Also, comment where you're watching from because that helps the channel grow and reach more people. Get ready for a story where power, loss, and impossible choices redefine everything. Let's begin. Prologue. Nyktos' oath before the returning darkness. Nyktos, the prime of death, restlessly watches the door of his chambers, eager to return to Sera, his wife, after her ascension. Though separated only minutes, the need to confirm she is safe consumes him. While speaking with Nyktos, the Draken he considers a father, they reflect on the threats that still persist. Kyn, Ats, and above all Kolis, Nyktos' cruel uncle. His hatred for Kolis is so deep that it unleashes violent shadows with just the mention of his name. Despite his restrained fury, Ash recognizes that he must protect Sera without being ruled by anger. Nyktos reminds him that many await seeing with their own eyes that Sera has retained her essence after the transformation. Ash vows to always care for her, and in the end returns to his room where Sera sleeps uneasily. Feeling her fear in dreams, he swears to protect her even if his own wrath consumes worlds. Chapter 1. Sera's Ascension and her awakening senses. Sera awakes from a nightmare in Ash's arms, finding comfort in his closeness. Though exhausted after the Ascension, her bond with Ash soothes her. As she adapts to her new condition as a prime, she discovers that her sight and other senses are intensifying. She recalls Kolis' hatred for her hair and experiences a latent fear that Ash detects immediately. He promises that, though he cannot kill him yet, he will make Kolis suffer like never before. As they talk, Sera notices that she begins to understand the Drakens, revealing that her transformation is still ongoing. They joke, kiss, and share promises of eternal love, though Sera admits she would have been incapable of letting Ash love another if she had died. Amid laughter and passion, they decide to leave the bed to face the responsibilities awaiting them. Just as Ash walks away, a white mist invades the room, bringing an ancient presence and total darkness. Chapter 2. The Rider's Trial and Sera's Decision. Sera awakens alone in a dark, damp place, with no sign of Ash or his prime essence. Wrapped in terror, she discovers that she stands before the three ancient riders, War, Pestilence, and Famine, who demand that she prove her worth. They give her a sword and pit her against a three-headed beast, which she manages to defeat after a fierce battle. But upon dying, the creature transforms into Tavius, her half-brother and executioner of the past. Blinded by anger and the memory of abuse, Sera brutally strikes him, ready to kill him again. However, the riders insist that their judgment is absolute. In a moment of revelation, Sera recognizes that she can choose not to act like a monster. She refuses to kill him, opting not to repeat mistakes. Tavius disappears and the riders declare her worthy. Alone in the cavern, Sera understands that the monster to be defeated was not him, but the one she carried within. Chapter 3. The Monster's Test and Nyktos' Awakening. Alone in the cavern, Sera reflects on the nature of the monster she faced, recognizing that it represents her cruelest and most impulsive part. Though she does not kill it, she understands that the rider's test sought to measure her control and ability not to yield to destructive power. A magical fissure leads her out of the cavern, plunging her into darkness until she reaches an infernal landscape populated by Sekyas. Suddenly awakening in her bedroom, she finds Nyktos, the Draken, who congratulates her on passing the test and recalls intimate moments that bind them. They speak of ethos and the gifts of intuition that Sera is beginning to develop, comparing her progress with that of the prime of life. Nyktos affirms her worth despite not killing the monster, reminding her that even Nyktos had flaws. The chapter concludes with the revelation that her inner monster could also be her salvation, not a latent threat. Chapter 4. The Crown, the Fangs, and the Power to Decide. Sera watches Ash's agitated awakening after the rider's spell. Their deep and intimate connection reconnects them as he struggles to contain his prime form. After calming, Sera recounts her trial to him, and together they reflect on their darkest parts, on the inner monsters that do not define who they are. The conversation becomes intense, addressing the fear of not being worthy, the past with Kolis, and Sera's role as the prime of life. They talk about the future of the chosen and the desire to change the right, allowing freedom of choice. Amid doubts and anxiety, Ash reaffirms Sera's courage and compassion, highlighting why she is fit to lead. After moments of calm, Sera confronts her reflection and discovers the change in her eyes. Silver veins fragment her irises. She reaffirms with determination. She will accept her power, her decisions, and her destiny, because the worlds depend on her. Chapter 5. Revelations among strawberries, scars, and ancient truths. Sera and Ash share an intimate dinner while discussing his scars, her recent ascension, and the latent power beginning to manifest within her. They speak of Nibirius and Kolis's Drakens, of the past with Callum and the unusual resilience of the returned, revealing that he was brought back by Kolis's desperation. Sera recalls fragments seen during her stasis. The ancients were stars, precursors of the primes, and some fell to earth and remain asleep, linked to the balance of life and death. If that balance is broken, they will awaken, bringing destruction. Together they analyze how to stop Kolis without killing him, bury him with bones of the ancients. They consider seeking answers in Kiela and propose a new form of shared governance with other primes. The conversation concludes with the decision to summon them to attempt to unite forces against Kolis. Just then, Sera perceives a powerful presence approaching. Chapter 6. Hidden Trauma and the Strategy Against the False King. After Ash's question, Sera is trapped in painful silence. Intense memories of her time with Kolis invade her. His manipulation, his obsession, the forced submission, the guilt and the pretense. Though she tries to hide it, her anguish is evident. She changes the subject to how to face Kolis, and they agree that killing him is not an option, so they must bury him with the ancient's bones. Ash reveals that this weakened him when it was used against him decades ago. They reason that the ancients are in stasis thanks to an unknown method, possibly known only by the Hados or Kiela. Sera suggests forming a council with primes and Drakens to govern together, moving away from Kolis's authoritarian regime. Ash supports the idea, and together they begin to plan a summons. They reflect on their monstrous sides, on balance, and just as they feel they have clarity about the future, Sera perceives a strong presence approaching rapidly. Chapter 7. The Bond with Jadis, Reaver's Confession, and the Vowed Promise. Sera perceives Jadis' arrival before Ash, demonstrating her growing connection with the Drakens. The little one runs to embrace her tenderly, followed by Reaver, who, affected, admits his fear at thinking that Sera and Ash would not return. Sera consoles the young Draken and feels that she can understand Jadis' words, a new sign of her powers. Later, Jadis eats strawberries, while Reaver approaches shyly, revealing how much he missed her. The boy ends up asleep in her lap, moved by the affection received. Alone with Ash, Sera recognizes that she promised Reaver that everyone would be safe, a difficult promise in the face of the imminent threat. Nyktos arrives, and the conversation leads them to speak of the ancients and the risk that Kolis could become a prime of blood and bone. They both agree they must stop him, but Sera senses that an even more powerful entity could arise even after Kolis's fall. Chapter 8. Confessions with Ios and the Shadow of the Past. Alone in the room, Sera dresses for the first time in clothes chosen by her, facing the trauma tied to the dresses imposed by Kolis. Ios arrives, alive thanks to Sera, and embraces her with gratitude. They share confidences about death, the Ascension, and the difficulty of deciding to whom to return life. Sera reveals that, by reviving one mortal, another life is lost, a truth that torments her conscience. Ios, understanding, confesses the horrors suffered at Kaywane's hands, and Sera vows that she will make him pay, sealing an oath that cannot be broken. Then, amid doubts about the balance between life and death, they remember Ector, Orphine, and the inevitable sacrifices. Finally, Ios confirms having heard rumors about the time Sera spent with Kolis. Memories of abuse and humiliation surface, and both women are sincere about the violence they suffered. Sera understands that her pain was not nothing. It was everything. Chapter 9. The Sun, Doubt, and the Buried Gods. As the sun warms her face, Sera allows herself to be enveloped by held-back emotions, recalling the conversation with Ios and the pain her mother still causes her. She reflects on Lasagna and the changes after the end of the rot, wondering if the land is healing and if her family will remember her. Observing the red forest, the vision of the buried gods tempts her. She could free them only to destroy them, preventing their use by Kolis. However, she halts, doubting whether her impulses are a form of power abuse, similar to Kolis's. Then, her magical connection reveals intimate details about Armentrout, a god loyal to Empress, confirming the increase of her intuition. Ash and Reaver arrive, sharing a warm moment. Together, they reflect on Reaver's growth spurts, the political situation of the courts, and the future of the Shadowlands. Finally, Sera prepares to face her new position as queen. Chapter 10. The Gathering in Lethe and the Fear of Kolis's Return. Sera enters the council chamber amid reverences that overwhelm her, and although she commands them to stop, she faces the real weight of her title. The gods present, with jokes and wagers, show respect and warmth, though tension persists. Rain, now with a different attitude, offers her a significant bow. Reaver and Jadis contribute tenderness, while Sera assumes her role in the meeting. They discuss the massive arrival of gods from other courts and the logistical difficulties of food and housing. The conversation turns to Kolis. Some want to hunt him now, but others insist on planning before acting. Sera shares her experience with him and suggests that Kolis is not impulsive but calculated. She believes he will avoid direct war without sufficient power. Ash, however, warns that he could act unpredictably when losing control. Tension rises, but Sera reaffirms. She will no longer be a victim, and she will not allow Kolis to win. Chapter 11. The Council Strategy and the Threat of the Ancients. During a key meeting in Lethe, Sera proposes forming a council in which all the primals have a vote, breaking with Kolis's authoritarian model. The idea is well received but raises doubts about the possible loyalties of those summoned. The courts are analyzed, revealing that only some show just values. Sera suggests seizing the corrupt courts, but Ash and Rain warn of the risks and consequences. The conversation turns to the threat of the ancients, revealing that not all died, but some were buried to maintain the balance between life and death. Sera asserts that if they discover how they were contained, they can do the same with Kolis. Finally, it is decided that Ash will speak with Ats to summon the primals, accompanied by Layla and Nyktos. Sera, for her part, prepares to give a public speech, facing her fear with the firm conviction to show that everyone is welcome in Lethe. Chapter 12. The Queen, the Call, and the Awakening of Life. As she prepares for her first speech before the people of Lethe, Sera faces her anxiety and reaffirms her identity as a primal, choosing sober attire instead of a traditional dress. Ash tries to protect her from the weight of her role, but Sera insists on speaking, understanding that her presence inspires hope. They reflect on the summons to the primals, the balance between life and death, and the risk of returning life to the dead. The night culminates with an intimate moment between them, sealing their mutual support. Later, a growing unease leads Sera to a revelation. As the primal of life, she can restore rivers and lakes without relying on rain. She understands that she must act now to accelerate the Shadowlands' recovery. With the essence pulsing within her, her decision is firm. She will return water to the land and thus mark the beginning of a new era of hope and life for her people. Chapter 13. The River's Awakening and the Power of Will. Sera and Ash secretly ride toward the dry riverbed to test her intuition about restoring life in the Shadowlands. Accompanied by the Drakens Athon and Crowley, tension builds as Sera reflects on the past and the power inherited from Nyktos. When she touches the ground with her hands and releases her essence, her power manifests in an explosion of golden and silver energy. The river comes to life, water geysers rise with wings of water, and the landscape is transformed. Trees fill with leaves, poppies bloom, and the rot disappears. Ash, moved, kneels before her, calling her my queen. Back at the palace, Sera has an intimate encounter with Ash, but is interrupted by a vision in the mirror. Kolis has awakened. The connection between life and death is activated. Sera understands everything. Her act of restoration has broken the seal that kept the primal of death dormant. Chapter 14. The Eternal Bond, the Threat, and the Revealed Crowns. Sera awakens disturbed, with nausea and a tingling sensation that reveals the activation of her bond with Kolis. Now awake. Her reflection in the mirror confirms the return of the primal of death. Ash tries to calm her while she explains the ancestral connection between life and death. At dawn, Sera walks the parapet, observing the changes her will brought to the Shadowlands. The land blooms, but the dying forest remains untouched, protected by death. She reflects on the darkness trapped within it and understands that life cannot cross its boundaries. Reaver, connected to her through the Notum, senses her anxiety, and together they share a moment of tenderness. Ash arrives and confirms that Rain wants to show them something important. Sera admits to having unintentionally awakened Kolis. Ash lessens her blame, reminding her of her strength as a primal. Upon entering the hall, Rain greets them with tension. Finally, he reveals what changed everything. It is the crowns. Chapter 15. The Revealed Crowns and the Union Before the Gods. Sera and Ash discover that his missing crown has returned to his head. When Sera touches hers, both crowns react with brilliant energy, revealing that they are living extensions of the true primals. Kolis's crown now obeys Ash, while the life crown recognizes Sera. Although Sera decides not to use it publicly, the consistory awaits them. The reception is monumental. Drakens, soldiers, and thousands witness their arrival. Nervous but determined, Sera refuses to give her speech from the throne and steps down to the level of the people. With Ash at her side, she announces a new era. Joint rule of king and queen, the end of tyranny, and the protection of all who call Lethe home. The people acclaim them with joy. That night, however, a nightmare with Kolis destroys her, reliving her trauma. Ash consoles her, though Sera hides the true terror she experienced. Chapter 16. The Portal, the Ancient, and the Primal Summoning. Sera tries to resume normality after the nightmare, but tension with Ash grows because of her refusal to talk. While they practice with the ether, Ash encourages her to trust herself more. Between jokes and intimate moments, the atmosphere softens until a disturbance alerts them. A portal bursts into their room. From it emerges a powerful being, tall, tattooed, and with kaleidoscopic eyes. His presence is overwhelming. Although Sera recognizes him as an Eri, a Hato, his unsettling attitude and gaze throw her off. He mocks her power and calls her baby primal, which unleashes Sera's ether. Ash confronts the Hato, ready to protect her. At that moment, a distant rumble announces the arrival of another force. The Hato reveals his purpose. He has come to take Sera because she has been summoned by the true primal of death. The threat they believe dormant now demands her presence. Chapter 17. Kolis' summons and the battle for control. Sera receives Kolis' summons through the ancient Aiden, who confirms that the call cannot be ignored. Tension in Lethe explodes when Ash, enraged, confronts Aiden, and Nyktos intervenes to prevent a lethal fight. Amid the chaos, Sera undergoes a partial transformation. Her nails lengthen, revealing her growing power. Ash resists letting her go, fearing for her safety, but she convinces him with firmness and vulnerability. In an intimate and passionate farewell, they reaffirm their bond, aware of the imminent danger. Ash asks her to use Kolis' fear for Sotoria's soul as a weapon. Aiden transports her to Dalos, where the corrupt atmosphere and disturbing presences foreshadow the encounter. There, Sera asserts her autonomy, defying norms, mocking Callum, and killing him with his own dagger. Aiden confirms that her existence has altered the balance, and the war could unleash the awakening of the ancients. Chapter 18. The Throne Hall, the Monsters, and Kolis' Deal. In Dalos, Sera faces a hostile welcome. Defying the imposed waiting, she bursts into Kolis' palace, unleashing her ether against the doors. Guided by instinct, she witnesses decadent scenes in the hall. Gods and ascended in sexual acts and feeding. Kewin provokes her with vulgarity, and Sera frees a divinity forced to please him. Enraged, Kewin tries to attack her, but Aiden freezes him in time. At that moment, Kolis appears, weaker, without a crown and dressed in crimson red, the color of death. His mere presence alters the atmosphere, but Sera does not kneel. The confrontation is charged with tension. Kolis doubts her identity as Sotoria, but still believes that her soul is in Nyktos' hands. He rejects any submission to the new order and reveals his intention to offer her a deal. Sera, controlling her fear, stands firm before the primal who represents everything she swore to destroy. War inevitable already breathes close. Chapter 19. The Impossible Deal with Kolis. Seraphena faces Kolis, who offers her a deal. Peace in exchange for Sotoria's soul. Although Aiden explains that deals are vows that the world itself must respect, Sera feels the deep rejection of giving up Sotoria, even if it means avoiding war. By not accepting the agreement, she is forced to create her own offer, demanding that Kolis renounce the throne and live without ruling. The encounter escalates when Kolis uses the psychic, an ability that reverts the victim to their darkest traumas. Sera relives past horrors and understands how far Kolis has come with his restored power. Although she manages to maintain her composure, it becomes clear that he is still an imposing threat. Later, in conversation with Aiden, she learns that Kolis has suffered constant punishments, but that his isolation and envy have transformed him. Despite everything, Sera does not regret it. She has decided not to give up Sotoria, no matter the consequences. Chapter 20. An uncertain truce between decisions and doubts. Seraphena returns to Nyktos and reveals the deal proposed by Kolis, as well as the psychic ability that nearly broke her. Although she did not accept the agreement, she feels divided for having offered an alternative. Nyktos, and Rain listen silently to her account, questioning Kolis' true intentions. Seraphena believes that he wishes to avoid war, although his desire for Sotoria and power remains present. Ash doubts, fearing that his love for Sotoria will not overcome his thirst for control. Despite the tension, they all agree that they must continue with the plan to gather allies and prepare for the worst. Later, in private, Sera fears she may have failed, but Ash reassures her, though he admits feeling frustrated for not having foreseen Kolis's proposal. Both recognize that peace must be the first option, though dangerous. The conversation ends with uncertainty. Kolis has yet to respond and his threat remains latent. Chapter 21. Power unleashed after Sera's ascension. Seraphena seeks training to control the strength she gained after her ascension, but Kars refuses to help her. Reaver, always attentive, reveals that the guard lies out of fear of hurting himself, leading Saiyan to intervene. During a walk, he explains to Sera that, after her transformation, she does not yet know her true strength and could hurt someone unintentionally. The conversation confronts her with the need to be more conscious and controlled, as she debates between her desire to act and the risks of her new power. Later, Rain seeks her out to talk about palace administration, suggesting that Ios organize the staff. Between domestic ideas and personal reflections, Sera discovers that she can summon Holland, an ancient who might have answers about the prophecy. Although her first attempt yields no results, the unexpected visit of Penelope and Ward confirms that the prophecy is more complex than she ever imagined. Chapter 22. Penelope reveals the lost secret of the prophecy. The visit of Penelope and Ward surprises Seraphena, who, thanks to her clairvoyance, discovers that Ward was the first victor, created to protect an ancestral line that would culminate in her birth. The story of Ronan Leslie, her ancestor, connects directly to her and links her to a legacy of change and resistance. Amid memories and revelations, Sera shares the hidden part of the prophecy that Kolis mentioned, a vision that speaks of great powers teetering and the appearance of the primal of blood and ash. Penelope, visibly affected, states that that interpretation is wrong. The chapter explores deeply the meaning of the prophecy, the risks of divine imbalance, and Sera's central role as bearer of two crowns. Despite feeling overwhelmed, Seraphena reaffirms her will to seek answers and use her power wisely, understanding that her destiny is not only exceptional, but also challenges the very Hados themselves. Chapter 23. Revelations and doubts about the prophecy. Seraphena talks with Penelope and Ward about the hidden part of the prophecy that Kolis showed her. Penelope shares her vision, two daughters who remake worlds after the gods' dream, while wars destroy and build cities. The discussion about the identity of the giver of blood and bearer of bone suggests it may involve the primals of life and death. Seraphena remembers that war can only be won with blood and bone, which leads to considering whether that symbolic union could change the course of destiny. Additionally, she suggests that perhaps the end announced by Kolis has not yet arrived because he himself must enter stasis, as happened with the other gods. Ward proposes that the key may lie with Kiela, who knows the full version of the prophecy. Before departing for the plains of Thaya, Seraphena decides to seek her, convinced that that truth could change everything. Chapter 24. Sleepwalking and the attack of the Kanakos. Guided by a presentiment, Seraphena sleepwalks to where Ash, Nyktos, Layla, and Ats are. Surprise is widespread, but Sera insists that something dark is approaching. Ats appears wounded after a misunderstood joke with Ash. As they talk, the atmosphere turns tense when Sera senses the presence of death seconds before the Kanakos attack. The creatures, enormous and deformed, emerge from the trees. The group unites to fight. Nyktos summons fire, Layla fires her shots, and Ash and Ats fight hand to hand. Sera summons her primal power and launches streams of ether that illuminate the battlefield, destroying the beasts. One nearly reaches her, but Ash saves her. In the end, they understand that the Kanakos were not after her, but after Ash. The threat has been contained, but the fear remains. If those creatures manage to come this far, the true danger has not yet begun. Chapter 25. Nyktos' hidden plan and Seraphena's final decision. After sleepwalking into Ash's office, Seraphena and he discuss her impulsive visit to Vathi. The tension between them soon turns into desire, but she manages to interrupt the moment to talk about Ats and the primals. They confirm that Layla will accompany Ats, which unsettles Sera due to their relationship. Later, they share an intimate reflection about Holland's absence, the painting of Ash's parents' portraits, and what preserving their memory meant. During that conversation, Sera confesses to having remembered a new part of the prophecy that Penelope had not mentioned. They also talk about Nyktos' real intentions, and Ash considers that perhaps he wished for Sera and Nyktos to become the true primals of life and death. Sera acknowledges that being targets of Kolis makes them vulnerable, but she swears to protect Ash. Finally, they agree that their destiny will be to share that power and face whatever comes. Chapter 26. The Irene and the Arrival of the God of Vengeance. While Sera feeds from Ash, she confronts the memory of Vises and her own discomfort with the act. Ash assures her that he enjoys it and only thinks of her when it happens. They then share an intimate moment full of trust and affection, ending with Sera wanting to return the gesture, though Ash refuses to feed from her out of caution. Just as they plan to depart for the plains of Thaya, Ats returns to the Shadowlands accompanied by Theron, a powerful and dangerous Onairu. Although wary, Ash accepts his presence upon learning he does not support Kolis. Ats reveals that the unrefused deal with Kolis has activated an Irene, a truce imposed by the Hados that limits their movements. During this period, they cannot recruit other primals or attack, although Kolis can act indirectly. Sera understands that her offer, though well-intentioned, has left them vulnerable. At that moment, a new primal unexpectedly enters the throne room. Chapter 27. The brutal confrontation between Ash and Kyn. Kyn bursts into court demanding payment for his slain hounds and insists on rain as compensation. His arrogance provokes a tense exchange with Seraphena and Ash, ending in an open threat. Theron scorns his presence and Ats attempts to calm the situation, but Kyn persists in humiliating and provoking everyone, even insinuating that Kolis offered Seraphena as a reward. Ash loses control and attacks with uncontrollable fury, transforming into his deadliest form. Piercing Kyn, he rips out his heart and devours it, sending a bloody warning. Although Kyn survives, the message is clear. Ats is stunned by the unleashed violence, while Rain and Theron observe in silence. Seraphena, without intervening, understands the political and emotional impact of the scene. Later, in private, Ash and Sera reflect on their past traumas, revealing the atrocities both faced because of Kolis, vowing never to repeat that legacy of horror. Chapter 28. The prophecy revealed by Kiela and the origin of Celestite. Ash and Seraphena visit Kiela, the goddess of rebirth, to ask her about the ancients and the prophecy. She reveals that the ancients were buried in the mortal world with the aid of a mineral called Celestite, capable of blocking the ether. Sera identifies a possible location in Oak Ambler. Then, Kiela shares a scroll with the complete version of the prophecy, which mentions two daughters born of the same power, a primal of blood and ash, and a great finale marked by death and destruction. Sera and Ash suspect that they are the givers and bearers mentioned, and that Sotoria is the herald. Upon returning, they inform Ats about the Celestite, and he confirms that he guards the star, where Sotoria's soul lies. Finally, Ats admits that Nyktos was the one who caused Sotoria's second death at her own request, revealing a painful and decisive truth for everyone's future. Chapter 29. routine, memories, and revelations about the passage of souls. 2 weeks after their encounter with Kiela, Seraphena enjoys moments of peace in the Shadowlands, while Saiyan searches the caverns for celestite. Between training and daily tasks, Sera spends time with Jadis and Reaver, reflects on the past, and considers visiting the Vale to see her father. When speaking with Rahar, she discovers that when Ash was captive, souls did not cross the pillars until he or, in his absence, Rahar or Rain wrote their names in blood in the Book of the Dead. Rahar reveals that Ash granted him that power after reclaiming his soul, which moves Sera deeply. Later, Rain informs her that Theron is staying at the palace and she requests new furniture to improve the office. Though everything seems calm, Sera senses the arrival of an unknown primal, putting her on alert and foreshadowing a possible conflict that interrupts the momentary peace achieved. Chapter 30. The confrontation with Vises and Rain's warning. Seraphena confirms that the one who has arrived is Vises and decides to confront her directly, leaving Reaver and Jadis under guard. On the parapet, Vises demands to see Nyktos and hurls provocations, insinuating her past closeness with him. Sera responds with fury, lands before the goddess, summons a Thon, and confronts her with power and disdain. Vises insults, threatens, and evokes the deal with Kolis, intensifying Sera's rage. After a brutal fight, Sera strikes her, injures her, and bites her without killing her. Nyktos and Rain intervene to stop her, reminding her of the consequences of provoking a war. Vises retreats wounded but warns that if they do not accept the deal, they will regret it. Later, Rain speaks to Sera alone and reveals that he knows what she did to free him. Though Sera insists nothing happened with Kolis, Rain advises her to speak with Nyktos before others use that truth against her. Chapter 31. Vises' warning and the bond between Sera and Ash. Ash returns from the pillars and finds Seraphena shaken by her confrontation with Vises. Although Sera minimizes her injuries, Ash perceives her state and shows concern. Sharing the details of the fight, Sera confesses that she was close to killing Vises, which only was avoided by Nyktos' intervention. Ash understands her reaction and reveals that he himself has acted with equal violence in the past, strengthening the bond between them. During training, Sera notices his improved endurance since the Ascension. At night, while trying to sleep, she reflects on the imminent war, the impact of either on the mortal world, and the need to warn Lysania. She talks with Ash about her responsibility and they agree that she must travel to deliver the warning. Although they cannot go together, Ash accepts that Nyktos accompany her. The chapter closes with an intimate moment between them, where love and mutual protection prevail. Chapter 32. Suspicions about Phanos and the gift of the ancient bone. Seraphena awakens nauseous and finds Bele and Ios with her, who notice her physical state. Bele uses her ability to perceive temperament and describes Sera as impulsive, vengeful, and loyal. Later, Sera meets with Ash, Ats, Rain, and Saiyan to discuss new news. Ats reveals that Kolis has met secretly with Phanos and that Demetria, a potential ally, remains in his court as a spy. The mention of Varys and Callum generates tension, and it is confirmed that some ancients escaped. Sera and Ash understand that Phanos could ally with Kolis out of convenience, which forces them to plan how to influence his decision after the Irene. Before departing, Ash gives Sera a dagger forged from ancient bone, engraved by Ats. The gesture deeply moves Sera, who feels valued. The chapter concludes with Sera ready to sleepwalk to Lysania, accompanied by Nyktos. Chapter 33. The Returned at the Royal Table and the Hidden Symbol of the Mural. Seraphena arrives with Nyktos in Lysania and senses the change in the weather, a sign of the Rot's retreat. As she advances through the gardens, she discovers that she can feel the imprints of the Drakens, a unique ability of the true primals. In the palace, her presence confounds the guards, and unintentionally she heals one of them, revealing a new power. Upon entering the dining room, she finds Callum eating with his family. Enraged, she attacks him without restraint, using ether to neutralize him. Although she does not kill him, she leaves him immobilized. Ash's arrival, following a spectacular entrance, confirms his emotional connection with Sera and reinforces her power as a primal before everyone. Ash forces everyone to kneel before her and takes Callum away to imprison him. Later, Sera speaks with Ezra, Marisol, and her mother, revealing that Callum is a return sent by Kolis. The chapter ends with the promise of a future visit and a conversation pending. Chapter 34. The Queen's Redemption and Seraphena's Shared Heritage. After Ash departs with Callum, Seraphena talks with Ezra and Marisol about her identity as a primal. As they reveal details about Callum's activities in Lasania, they discover that he was the one who revealed how to kill a primal and that he used that information to convince the Queen of her death. The revelation awakens doubts about his true intentions. Ezra and Marisol commit to preparing the kingdom for the possible effects of war in Elysium. Then, Nyktos confirms his identity as the first Draken, which leaves the queens even more astonished. Seraphena says goodbye, but before that her mother asks to speak with her alone. In that conversation, the queen admits her emotional absence and confesses that she named Sera in honor of the Silver Knight. Although Sera still cannot forgive her, she recognizes that her strength also comes from her. The chapter closes with the hope of reconciliation and a future conversation about her father. Chapter 35. Interrogation of Callum and the discovery of an unexpected bond. Seraphena returns to the castle with Nyktos and joins Ash, Ats, Rain, and the others to interrogate Callum, the returned. The discovery of his physical resemblance to Sotoria and Sera raises suspicions about a familial link. During the interrogation, Callum is evasive and mocking, provoking Ash to break several of his bones in an attempt to get answers. Callum admits he was in Wayfair on his own, supposedly to visit Sera's mother, and claims he no longer has Kolis's favor. He also states he desires his sister's soul, although Sera refuses unequivocally. Despite his resistance, he does not reveal how he obtained the information to kill a primal. When the Irene's limit is reached, Sera plunges the ancient bone dagger into his forehead before Ats takes his body away. The chapter closes with a bad feeling that awakens Sera in the middle of the night. Chapter 36. The Sekya's Attack and Nyktos' Unleashed Power. Sera wakes with an unnatural sensation that Ash later identifies as a disturbance in the abyss. Although he tries to protect her, she goes out onto the balcony and witnesses an invasion of winged creatures called Sekyas, escaped from the abyss. The guards fight, but the creatures are too fast and lethal. Sera joins the battle invoking her ether, though she discovers she cannot kill them. Only destroying their heads eliminates them. Rain, Bele, and Kars fight beside her while the number of victims increases. Sera tries to contain them, but her power is not enough. Finally, a powerful darkness covers the sky and Ash appears in his primal form. With wings of shadows and ether, he destroys the Sekyas with relentless force. Ash's presence halts the massacre. Sera understands that the Sekyas should not attack the living and that they only obey their true creator, Kolis. The chapter ends with the certainty that Kolis is strengthening. Chapter 37. The Sekyas, the Wounded, and Seraphena's Contained Fury. After the Sekyas' attack, Ash confirms that about 1,000 creatures emerged from the abyss and most escaped the Shadowlands. Only a primal of death can kill them, and not even the Drakens are immune to their violence. Although Bele defends Sera, Ash reproaches her for having fought without weapons, reinforcing the tension. The ether within her guides her to a room converted into an infirmary, where Kai and Ios tend to the wounded. Seeing Iridessa on the brink of death, Sera heals her by channeling the primal essence. As she continues healing other guards, she realizes that the ether responds to her desire to preserve life, not her nature of death. When she tries to save a guard who is already dead, Ash gently stops her. Together they leave the room, and although he expects to reprimand her, their emotions overflow and they end up in an intense, intimate encounter. Chapter 38. Seraphena's transformation and the awakening of her notiform. After a panic attack caused by her memories with Kolis, Seraphena loses control of the primal essence and, in Ash's sight, transforms for the first time into her notiform, a wild and powerful creature. In that state, she flees the palace, crossing rivers and forests, guided by the desire for freedom and escape. She runs for hours, feeling pure instinct and unrestricted strength for the first time. Upon reaching a portal to the mortal world, she encounters a huge silver wolf that has been following her. It is Ash, who has also adopted his notiform. He transforms and reaches out his hand, calling her by her name and asking her to return. By concentrating, Sera manages to regain her human form and Ash lifts her into his arms. Back in the castle, she struggles with shame and guilt, but Ash reiterates that nothing has changed. He still loves her as always. Chapter 39. Revelations, Hard Truths, and the Power to Heal. Sera takes refuge in the library, facing conflicting emotions about what happened with Kolis. Her thoughts overwhelm her. Guilt, shame, and the belief that her suffering was not enough to justify her trauma. There, Theron, the Onairu god, appears unexpectedly and reveals that he entered one of her dreams due to its emotional intensity. He explains that her pain affects her and that she should confront it to find peace, not only for herself but also for those around her. The conversation ends when Ash arrives. The tension between them is palpable, although he shows affection and protection, making clear how much he loves her. Ios later visits Sera and, after an intimate and honest conversation, she confesses everything that happened to her with Kolis. Speaking it out loud does not ease her pain, but it gives her a vital step toward healing. Upon learning that Rain secretly fed Ash, she understands that they are both healing together. Chapter 40. Voices of Death, the Call, and the Return to Lysania. Sera wants to talk with Ash, to open up completely, but her conversation with Rain is interrupted by a terrifying scream that only she can hear. Terrified, she discovers that it is not a single scream, but thousands, all inside her mind. She collapses as she feels the pain, despair, and death of thousands of people at once. Nyktos and the others arrive and reveal that Ash has been drawn to the pillars of Asphodel by a staggering number of souls. It is a call impossible for a primal of death to ignore. While the others try to understand what has happened, Sera knows the truth. It was not a natural disaster. It was something caused. And worst of all, the screams do not cease. She cannot ignore them. Feeling driven by the essence of her very being, and without stopping to think, she sleepwalks directly into the mortal world, into the heart of the horror. To Lysania. Chapter 41. The Massacre in Lysania and Sera's Unleashed Fury. Seraphena sleepwalks to Lysania and discovers a massacre. Bodies hanging, streets and beaches covered in corpses, and her family impaled on the walls. Ezra, Marisol, and her mother have been killed. Horror consumes her and fury transforms her. KYN confirms that this is Kolis's response to her deal. Sera unleashes herself as a force of ruin. She destroys Sumerians with either, executes Embrys with brutality, and causes an elemental catastrophe that sweeps through cities, villages, and mountains. By killing Empress, she releases energy so powerful that it sets the mortal world aflame and forms a forest of crimson trees. When she tries to restore life to the villagers, she succeeds, but seeing worship in their eyes, she feels she does not deserve it. She decides to call it the Blood Forest. She returns to Wayfair and promises to revive her own. However, Holland stops her, warning that restored life takes another life in exchange. She denies it, but doubt begins to grow. Chapter 42. The broken line between justice and vengeance. Seraphena travels to Dalos, destroys the Adarv, and besieges Kolis's palace with total devastation. She kills guards, gods, and returned, but discovers that Kolis has fled. She finds Ascended, including Jove, who dies in flames. Her brutality confronts her with her reflection. She has become something feared. She returns to Terra, resurrects villagers, and names the place Blood Forest. She decides to also revive Ezra and Marisol, but Holland stops her. He reminds her that she has already restored one life and that doing it again would break the balance, condemning others. Holland shows her the cost. Hundreds of deaths, razed cities, broken families. The truth crushes her. She accepts that her reaction to the massacre was as destructive as Kolis's own action. In the abyss of guilt, she breaks. Atz arrives in time to warn her. She must ascend a new primal before Empress's energy causes more death. Sera agrees and travels to Mount Lotho. Chapter 43. Penelope's Ascension and the Brutal Clash with Kolis. Seraphena reaches Mount Lotho to ascend Penelope as a new primal. The intense, brilliant process ends with an explosion of ether that transforms the goddess. When Penelope falls, Holland saves her and disappears with her after sensing Kyn's arrival. The battle begins with the appearance of Thrax, a hostile Draken, and Kolis bursts in violently, murdering Drakens from the sky. Sera, weakened, fights him with rage. Kolis destroys the court's control and triggers mass suicides in the palace. Sera tries to stop him without success. She faces Kolis in hand-to-hand combat. He humiliates her, strikes her, and reveals that he was the one who murdered her family in Lasania. Though nearly without strength, Sera responds fiercely, but her essence fails. When all seems lost, Ward appears and partially decapitates Kolis with an Umbra bone dagger, saving Sera at the last second and forcing the primal's temporary retreat. Chapter 44. Emotional defeat, uncontrollable Noda, and Ash's return. Sera is left physically and emotionally wounded after the battle. Ward rescues her, Atz arrives with Aurelia, and Theron appears, revealing himself to be the last Onairu. With only 2 Drakens remaining on Lotho, Sera orders immediate measures. Upon returning to the House of Hades, she confirms that Nyktos remains in the pillars, feeling everything she experienced. Guilt and loss consume her. She confesses having killed innocents, admits her failure as queen, and loses control, transforming into her Noda form. Nyktos holds her with strength and tenderness, reminding her of her promise. Calm returns when she mentions Ash, who feels her pain from the pillars. Jadis and Reaver stay with her and manage to comfort her. Time passes, the world trembles from what occurred, and she remains transformed, isolated in her pain. Only when she hears Ash's voice calling her, with tenderness and strength, does she feel it is possible to return. He has come back, and he is waiting for her. Chapter 45. Guilt, unconditional love, and the acceptance of darkness. Seraphena regains consciousness in Nyktos' arms, who bathes her with tenderness and accompanies her in silence as she processes the physical and emotional damage left by the confrontation with Kolis. Ash, ashamed of her actions during her Noda form, confesses her guilt for the destruction of Terra, Dalos, and Lysania, and for Embrys's death without a prepared successor. She feels responsible for the chaos and fears she has become the very thing she swore to destroy. Ashe listens without judgment, acknowledges her pain, and reminds her she is not like Kolis because she feels remorse. He assures her that she is still Seraphena Miral, even with her darkness, and that her guilt shows her humanity. He holds her unconditionally, promising he will be by her side as she heals. Together they accept that they cannot change what happened, but they can learn from it. The scene closes with a silent vow. They will face the future as allies, without losing each other. Chapter 46. Confessions, Trauma, and a Vow to Halt Vengeance. Seraphena opens her heart and shares with Nyktos the most painful memories of her life. The forced training, the mark of abuse, her suicide attempt, and the constant fear of losing control. She speaks of the deal she accepted with Kolis to free reign, which exposed her to his manipulation and violence. She confesses that she still feels the weight of shame and disgust, and that she fears becoming a monster like him if vengeance consumes her. Ashe listens with respect, validating every word, and assures her that surviving does not make her guilty. Despite the love that binds them, Sera asks him to promise that if she ever loses control again and becomes a threat to others, he will be the one to stop her. Nyktos accepts the request without hesitation. The chapter concludes with both understanding that protecting each other also means making difficult decisions. Chapter 47. The Final Plan and Sotoria's Fate. Seraphena and Ashe discuss the next steps in their war against Kolis, considering for the first time a direct offensive with political consequences. As they review strategies, Sera proposes summoning all the primals, including KYN and VCs, to give them an ultimatum: join or be replaced. They recognize the danger of that decision, but also its necessity. Atz informs them that many have deserted to Dalos, and they consider possible replacements like Layla or Theon. Sera, moved by the memory of the Sirens, proposes governing the Kalasta Isles to prevent more violence. She also confesses that she will not use Sotoria's soul and that Kolis will be buried instead of killed. Upon learning this, Atz is deeply moved. The chapter concludes with a private meeting where Sera, Ashe, and Atz seal their final agreement. They will face Kolis with strategy and avoid Sotoria's forced reincarnation, marking a new direction for the war and for the balance between life, death, and choice. Chapter 48. Nausea, strange dreams, and an unexpected suspicion. Alone in her chambers, Seraphena faces unexpected physical discomfort. Intense nausea, constant fatigue, and a strange connection to a dream lived during stasis awaken in her an alarming possibility. She might be pregnant. The symptoms match, and she recalls the dream image of two pups beside her Nota, which she now interprets as a vision of twins. Fear seizes her as she tries to rationalize the idea, reviewing details of her body, the elapsed time, and the apparent instinctive protection during past battles. Ashe's arrival interrupts her reflection, and although he notices her agitation, Sera avoids revealing her suspicions. She prepares for the meeting with the primals, hiding her anxiety. Already crowned, she concentrates to summon each one, including KWN and VCs. With the threat of war latent and a new secret growing inside her, Sera begins the final movement that will decide the fate of all. Chapter 49. The Primal's Choice and the New Governing Pact. Seraphena enters the throne room alongside Nyktos to face the remaining primals and present her proposal. Although the tension is intense, she refuses to demand automatic submission and rejects ruling solely through her crown or the essence in her blood. She declares that Nyktos is worthy of loyalty because of his actions, but states that neither of them will rule alone. She proposes a shared reign and a true balance among primals, far from the fear imposed by Kolis. During the debate, Seraphena acknowledges her own mistakes, including Embers's death, and takes responsibility for the consequences. VCs and KYN reject the alliance and leave the hall, while Phanos chooses to remain neutral out of fear of Kolis's revenge. Even so, several primals and leaders recognize the worth of Seraphena and Nyktos, accepting their vision. The chapter ends with the consolidation of a new political and moral path for Elysium. Chapter 50. Oaths of Loyalty, Inevitable Sacrifices, and an Unexpected Revelation. After the dissidents leave, Ats reaffirms his oath of loyalty to Seraphena and Nyktos, followed by Bele, Penelope, and Maya, sealing a powerful alliance. Each oath strengthens the primal bond and confirms support for the new form of government. Kiela, the primal of rebirth, reveals that she cannot swear loyalty due to an ancient pact imposed by the fates, which forces her to prepare for her transformation and withdrawal from the realms. Despite the pain the news causes, everyone accepts her decision and begins to plan the next steps against Kolis. Later, Seraphena seeks out Ios in private, worried about physical symptoms and a troubling dream. Though she tries to convince herself it's just stress, she allows Ios to use her gift. The final confirmation completely changes the outlook. Seraphena is pregnant, and not with one, but with 2 children. Chapter 51. Sera's decision, fear of the unknown, and the courage to face it all. Sera receives Ios's confirmation. She is 3 months pregnant with twins. The news overwhelms her, as she never imagined herself as a mother and still feels she's barely had time to live her relationship with Ash. Ios tries to calm her, reminding her that she has options, including not continuing, and that no one has the right to judge her. Although Sera values her support, she knows deep down that she cannot make any decision without first speaking to Ash. Despite the fear, she begins to accept what she feels. She already loves the lives growing within her. Later, alone at the pond, she reflects on everything her pregnancy implies. The risks, the uncertainty, but also the deep, unexpected love beginning to blossom. Just as she submerges herself in the water seeking silence and clarity, Ash finds her. After assuring him she wasn't trying to hurt herself, Sera gathers the courage and tells him the truth. She is pregnant. Chapter 52. Ash's reaction, the full revelation, and a new certainty. Sera's confession leaves Ash speechless. He's so shocked that he takes a while to react, but when he finally processes it, he's deeply moved. It pains him to think he could have lost them all during the Ascension. Upon learning they are twins, his surprise grows, but so does his joy. He tells Sera he never imagined being a father, but now he can't picture anything more important. They share an intimate and deeply emotional moment in the water, where desire mixes with love and the new reality that binds them even closer. Later, in the privacy of their room, Sera reflects on the changes ahead, the doubts, fears, and the possibility of keeping the news a secret. Together, they talk about names, the prophecy, and what these babies mean to them. Though fear still lingers, they know they have each other and will do whatever it takes to protect their family. Chapter 53. Sera's choice and Helena's legacy. Sera tells Ios that she has decided to be a mother alongside Nyktos, a revelation that sparks joy and support. The happiness mixes with internal fears about her violent past and her ability to raise children, fears she also shares with Nyktos. He tells her the story of his mate Helena, who, like Sera, carried guilt and shadows from the past but was a fierce and loving mother. Through the memory, Nyktos comforts Sera, assuring her that love for her children will guide her. Later, Kai performs a medical exam and explains the risks of a primal pregnancy, warning that the 3rd trimester will bring great vulnerability. Although Sera can still use either and feed normally, She must avoid injury or wasting energy. Tension rises when Ash changes plans without consulting her, determined to protect her. However, Sera has no intention of staying on the sidelines of the battle. Chapter 54. Sera and Ash's pact to face Kolis. Sera and Ash argue intensely about her involvement in the plans against Kolis. He tries to keep her away from the mission to protect her and their children, but Sera defends her place, afraid of losing Ash if he faces the enemy alone. After a painful exchange, they reach an agreement. They will fight together, carefully, but without holding back. Sera promises not to expose herself unnecessarily, and Ash agrees not to restrain her, as long as she uses all her power when needed. Later, they travel to the plains of Thaya for Ione to be ascended and for Kiela to pass on her power. In a private conversation, Kiela reveals to Sera that Nyktos believed Sotoria was the primal of blood and bone and placed her in his bloodline to prevent her rise. This prophecy, dreamed by the ancients, could still come true if the fates intervene. Finally, Kiela dies peacefully, and Ione receives her power as the new primal. Chapter 55. The Assault on Visis's Palace and the Awakening of Fury. Sera, Ash, and Nyktos sleepwalk to Visis's Adarve, alerted by the feeling that Kolis is awakening. The garden and palace are filled with decadent beauty, but chaos soon erupts when the guards confront them. Ash and Nyktos fight brutally, and Sera holds back her power for her children's safety. Inside, they discover the palace decorated with grotesque portraits of Visis nude. After multiple skirmishes, they locate her bedroom thanks to one of Sera's visions. Upon finding Visis, Ash lets Sera face the primal alone. In a fierce and emotional fight, Sera unleashes her pent-up fury, recognizing that killing Visis is also confronting the part of herself she could have lost. She drinks her blood, absorbs her essence, and destroys her completely. She declares that she will erase her legacy and memory. Visis dies knowing she was judged and condemned for her own actions. Chapter 56. The Mass Graves of Kalasta and the Legacy of Death. Sera and Ash's visit to the consistory of the Kalasta Isles reveals the horror left by Visis. Thousands of bodies buried in 6 mass graves. Tindra, a local goddess, confirms that the bodies include everyone from criminals to victims of outbursts and jealousy, all without funeral rites. Sera orders them to be buried with honor, while the discovery reinforces her fear of uncovering more horrors like this. Visis's death, though necessary, leaves a mark on Sera, who can't help but feel empathy for what that woman once was before her corruption. In private, Ash comforts Sera, understanding her internal conflict. The next day, they search for Phanos but find his palace empty and the ships gone. Anxiety grows with the presence of strange creatures and the absence of soldiers. Sera senses a disturbance in Elysium and, alongside Ash, sleepwalks to the epicenter of a new battle. Kewyn has betrayed his brother Vathi. Chapter 57. Maya's Fall and the Battle of the Primals. The battle erupts brutally across the meadows of Vathi, where Sera witnesses the carnage between Atz's and Kewyn's gods, engulfed in Draken fire, lethal aether, and blood. Ash protects Sera, but she chooses to fight by his side, remembering her promise to avoid unnecessary risks. As soldiers fall and Aurelius strikes fiercely from the sky, Sera displays devastating skill, driven by her hidden fear, to protect the children she carries. The field becomes a hell of fire, shadows, and death, until a pang in her chest reveals Maya's fall. Kewyn and Etz clash fiercely, and when Etz defeats his brother, he orders Sera to ascend Layla. With tears and a heart-wrenching roar, Etz says goodbye to Kewyn. Sera departs for the Adarve, leaving behind a blood-stained hill and a scream that shakes the skies. Chapter 58. The Truce with Kolis and Holland's Return. After the devastation, Sera wakes with Ash absent, marked by Maya's loss and Atz's trauma after killing his brother. While visiting Ios and Layla, she senses Atz's silent presence by the latter's side, a reflection of his pain. In the office, leaders discuss the military situation, revealing part of KYN's army has surrendered, but thousands remain loyal to Kolis. Sera summons a fate, and to her surprise, Holland responds. Their reunion is emotional and revealing. A meeting with Kolis is proposed in the Lands of Bones under a false promise of truce. The conversation with Holland unveils tensions among the fates, their motives, and the feared awakening of the ancients. Finally, Holland confesses that Nyktos and Mycela have reached Arcadia thanks to a fate's intervention, leaving Ash and Sera moved and hopeful. Chapter 59. Atz's Choice and Ash's Promise. Sera wanders the palace seeking peace, while Holland has yet to return and Ash remains absent. Concerned, she visits Layla and finds Atz meditating. They talk about KYN's loss, and Atz confesses that although he knew what his brother had become, the last thing he saw was the brother who once comforted him. Sera encourages him to remember the KYN of the past, and Atz reveals that if Sotoria chooses to be reborn, he will enter stasis out of love. He also admits he can love both Layla and Sotoria. Sera leaves and finds Ash in the throne room, reflecting on his parents, the future, and their children. The moment turns into a passionate union, where body and soul seal their bond. Ash promises a future filled with life, love, and hope, finally free from Kolis' shadow. Chapter 60. Strategy in the Lands of Bones against Kolis. At dawn, Holland returns and confirms Kolis has accepted the meeting. The encounter will be held the next day at the ruins of the Sun Temple, on the cliffs of the Lands of Bones. In the war room, the group designs a strategy knowing Kolis will bring his forces. Ash plans to hide their armies in caves and woods, deploying Drakens and archers to block Sirens and gods arriving by bay. Theon, Atz, and Saiyan map out positions, and Sera prevents Saiyan from joining, as his ascension makes him vulnerable. Layla wishes to fight, but Sera convinces her to stay behind due to her recent ascension. As the defensive lines and reinforcements are finalized, tension builds. That night, Sera and Ash cling to love as a shield against fear, knowing the future of their family, Elysium, and the mortal world depends on the outcome of the next day. Chapter 61. The Bone Army and the Awakening of Kolis. Hidden with Ash on the cliffs of the Lands of Bones, Sera observes Kolis' treacherous army approach and the arrival of Sirens and Phanos. After ordering the attack, the battle explodes violently as Drakens breathe fire and arrows fill the sky. Sera and Ash hold their ground atop the cliffs, fighting retorns and enemies armed with bones of ancients. Kolis appears riding Nibirius, showing his dominance and provoking Ash. Sera holds him back to keep him from giving in to rage, but when Nyktos is attacked by Dakai, her fury drives her to unleash her full primal power. With a desperate scream, she summons the Bone Army buried beneath the battlefield, awakening the fallen from ancient wars, gods, mortals, and dragons. Amid the chaos, her will revives the dead to protect the living and transforms the Lands of Bones into the field of final hope. Chapter 62. The Final Fall of the True Primal of Death. The Bone Army answers Sera's call, launching against the Crimson Soldiers and enemy Drakens. Amid the battle, Sera and Ash storm a temple filled with foes and eventually track Kolis. After a fierce fight with Varus and the Retorns, Kolis appears, and a brutal duel unfolds between Ash and his uncle, both in their primal forms. Wounded, Sera intervenes, and with Theron and Nyktos' help, they weaken Kolis' mind. Finally, Ash impales him with a bone spear, triggering a powerful either reaction that threatens to destroy everything. Sera, resolute, holds him back. Kolis's body reduces to gray bones, his essence sealed in a temple bound with celestite. As the world breathes again, Sera and Ash, hand in hand, seal the defeat of the true primal of death with love and power, protecting the future of their children. Chapter 63. The Missing Star and the Prophecy. The group emerges from the tunnel onto the cliffs of the Stroud Sea, as that triggers the collapse that seals Kolis's tomb. Victory brings relief and a lingering unease tied to the prophecy and Sotoria. Sera insists on immediate action and travels to Esseli to retrieve the star. In the secret chamber, they find the pedestal empty and conclude that the fates intervened. Aiden appears and reveals truths about the Mural bloodline, Sotoria's inheritance, and Ithos's mistake in seeking a first daughter. The prophecy returns with force as Aiden announces that Sotoria will be reborn as a second daughter, touched by life and death, destined to awaken buried forces. Sera rejects fatalism and asserts the primacy of will. The twin pregnancy is confirmed, and a plan emerges. Find Callum, protect the children, and refuse to sacrifice a girl. The scene closes with hope. Chapter 64. Twin Hearts and a Blood Bond. 2 months later, Sera and Ash share a moment of intimacy that blends desire, trust, and healing before the celebration at the consistorium. The pregnancy progresses, and Sera's body triggers new responses that Ash observes with reverence. The couple resumes the act of feeding with care, mutual attentiveness, and control over past fear, turning it into a shared bond. Blood strengthens their connection and reveals a deep link that harmonizes their hearts. The encounter culminates in an intense union bursting with energy and ether, leaving physical traces in the room. After resting, they discover the synchronicity of their heartbeats and confirm it as a result of the recent awakening and blood exchange. They postpone explanations for the ceremony and prepare to appear in public. The passage highlights intimacy, consent, shared power, and the certainty of a chosen love that sustains their future. Chapter 65. Family, Stasis, and Promises. At the consistorium, the celebration gathers gods, drakens, and allies under lights and music as Sera watches over Reaver and Jadis. Vigilance remains after the war, with loyalists of Kolis still being hunted, including Sax. Amid dances and feasts, memories, losses, and bonds surface that define a chosen family. Sera speaks with Ats, senses his weariness, and accepts his decision to enter stasis to heal, with the promise of return. She also confides in Ward, entrusting him with a vital mission: to be Sotoria's victor if she is reborn, to train and protect her without harm. Ward accepts with honor. The night unfolds with laughter, departures, and reunions, as Sera reaffirms free will in the face of prophecy. With Ash at her side, she understands the future allows for choices, love, and preparation. The chapter closes affirming collective commitment, remembrance of the fallen, mutual care, and constant watch against future threats. Chapter 66. The Blessed One. Nyktos studies plans in Vathi and senses Sera nearby, well along in her pregnancy. He is overwhelmed by love, desire, and fear as labor nears and a recent bleeding forced her to rest. She bursts in, restless, unable to stay still, and they talk about where to live, between the Shadowlands and Dalos, considering alternating both as the realm rebuilds. Nyktos sits her on his lap, calms her, and admires her strength in the face of painful memories and nightmares. They speak of homes, of Ats, and the weight of absence. Desire arises despite imposed abstinence, with teasing and play that heightens tension without crossing lines. Nyktos proposes a special refuge and leads Sera through the eastern wing. He wishes to show her his paintings, to share intimacy, and preserve the moment before the birth. The scene ends with anticipation, tenderness, and the promise of a shared home. Chapter 67. The Star. An observer narrates the journey of a being born of primal blood, neither alive nor dead, bearer of the star. It traverses eras, witnesses the fall and rise of realms, avoids wolves and drakens, always returning to the cliffs of sorrow. The worlds whisper a prophecy of two daughters. The first fails, and the second bears ash and ice. The wanderer delivers the star to a queen, and destiny advances. Her birth awakens death and stirs the buried, unleashing eruptions, ruins, and the devastation of cities and seas. The Ascension releases ancient forces and rewrites histories, until blood and bone rise. Every decision, from sacrifices to desperate loves, leads to the brink of the end. Yet, the tale concludes that there is one force capable of breaking fate and offering hope to the worlds. Love in the face of ruin and the final universal silence. And that's the end of Born of Blood and Ash, a story where the balance between life and death is permanently shattered. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this summary, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Now tell me in the comments, do you think Sera crossed the line she swore never to cross? Or was it inevitable that she would become something beyond a primal?